Welcome to Watches with Dennis, everybody. And I'm doing another Friday evening stream, Friday evening for the United States. And this time I'm actually going to be talking about 5 of the watch brands that I've never owned, but want to. That I've wanted to get a watch, I've looked at getting a watch, but there are always various reasons why I've never pulled the trigger on those particular brands. So that will be the main topic tonight. But before going over that, as usual, I like to go ahead and get some housekeeping items out of the way. Pretty straightforward. I haven't had any recorded videos since the Saturday morning live stream that I typically do. And I do have another Saturday morning live stream planned tomorrow. It will not be about new releases, though I'm starting to think I should have done one. I should have done one on ugly watches because there have been a few that have just come out over this last week that look pretty much like abominations. And maybe I will do that in the future. But tomorrow's episode will actually be about watches and wonders. There's more of the lineup known. There are some new entities that have decided to participate in 2025. So I'm going to spend some time going over that. Because I think one of the common comparisons that people make is to Baselworld, I should say. And so I want to do some of that, a little bit of discussion about where Watches and Wonders is vis-a-vis that very popular show that existed in the past, before my time, before I was in watch collecting myself. But really, other than that, I did have a pretty good response to last Friday's video, which was about 5 watch brands that I have no intention at the present time of ever owning again. Not everyone loved that one. I get it. It was kind of negative, though it seemed like almost everyone who actually expressed negativity about the video did so because they did not like my takes on Omega, which I guess isn't particularly surprising because it is a brand that a lot of people kind of worship. They kind of turn to it as a Rolex substitute, or it's like a grail brand for a lot of people. And I just think it was enough money that a lot of people don't like hearing negative things about it, which I don't know why they watched the video, but apparently a few people didn't really care for it, but by and large, it did pretty good. So anyway, if you don't like negative videos, this one is going to be fine. We're going to be positive. We're going to talk about happy things, watch brands that I have positive things to say about. And so we will go ahead and we will get started here in a moment. In terms of what is on the wrist, I am wearing a Parmigiani PF Tonda. PF stands for Parmigiani Fleurier, which is the name of the brand. So it's kind of Parmigiani Fleurier, Tonda Parmigiani Fleurier. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. So Tonda PF micro rotor watch. It's my most recent acquisition. And so obviously, since I own that brand, it will not be one of the 5 that we're going to go ahead and discuss today. So let's go ahead and get right into it because I do not see any live chat that I need to catch up with. So let me go ahead and share the screen here. And the first brand I want to bring up is Breitling. Now, I was so close to pulling the trigger on Breitling pretty much in the first half of 2023. That was, I think, when I looked the most closely. It's kind of that January through June period. I was really exploring Breitling. And there are actually a number of models that I'm interested in. You'll see this as a theme across all 5 of the brands that I'm going to discuss today. This is not, I wish I had a specific watch, right? I could do a video like that. I don't know if I do it as a live stream, but I could go into like particular models that I'm interested in. And I often talk about that kind of as asides on a lot of these videos. But these are brands I've never owned. And there's multiple reasons why I've been interested in the brand. So I've given you 3 examples here in terms of the Top Time, which is probably of the 3, the one I've looked the least at. But it's one of those classic chronograph styles that I feel is very Breitling. If I want to air quote that, it's very Breitling. And I've liked the look of it. It's a vintage style that doesn't feel the same level as a lot of other vintage. There's sort of this genera vintage that you can kind of get a vibe from a lot of different brands. And there are some that have this look. Again, obviously, there are even watches that look a bit like the Navitimer, which is the one in the middle. The Navitimer is the watch that I came the closest to last year actually purchasing. I looked at non-chronograph versions a lot in particular, but I did look at some of the chronograph versions, which I think obviously is the most iconic look to the watch, and hence why I've given that as an example here. And the Chronomat. So the Chronomat is actually the second most common Breitling I've looked at. Again, I think the bezel and the way it's designed looks very distinct for this particular brand of watches. And so that kind of makes up the three. The main one I suppose I'd point out that isn't obviously on the display here, but a lot of people would point out, and a lot of people who've watched this channel would probably think, hey, wait a moment, Dennis, you're really into dress watches. Is why isn't there a Premier? Why isn't there a Premier B01 chronograph on this list? And the reason is I don't like cropped Arabic hour numerals, and that all of them are cropped on the Premier. So I can't get behind the Premier unless they do a redesign and make it not look like a pocket watch. And they aren't going to do that because, well, at least for the time being, because they have that look. It's a particular aesthetic, and that's what they run with. But there are plenty of other Breitlings that I've found are pretty interesting. So why have I not purchased Breitling? So obviously, there's always a reason behind every single one of the purchases or non-purchases in the case of this video. So even though I think that the look is by and large unique, and I have to say by and large because, for example, Zen has Breitling Navitimer looking watches. I believe they had a contract to be able to do the design. So there's a legitimate reason for it, but you can find a few instances of watches that kind of look like the Navitimer or look a lot like the Navitimer or the Chronomat, but not very many brands copy those by and large because it's not, they are not the hottest watch designs out there, but they're very iconic. But it's been a mix of things. One is the retail price of Breitling, especially for chronographs, is not a shallow. It's not a shallow entry point. So it does take a little bit of money to actually get into it, unless you want to consider used or secondhand, which is how I normally consider watches. It would be going, I said used or secondhand, I should have said gray. So I buy a lot of my watches used. I've bought a few gray market. Breitling does tend to take a bath, so it makes a lot of sense if you can, and it's not a particularly rare model to go ahead and just get something secondhand. And that's where I was kind of looking. But I started looking at the non-chronographs because the premium to get into any of the chronographs was so high that I was really put off by it. Another thing is Breitling, and they're not alone in this, but everything is their own. They list as their own caliber, but a lot of the watches are actually ETA based. So given that, I really struggle mightily with 38-hour power reserves for multi-$1,000 watches, unless we're getting a lot of really cool complications or something. And that kind of leads into the third thing. Breitling's known for really one complication and one complication only, not counting cool bezel slide rules and stuff. And that's the chronograph, right? The actual, mechanical complications. It's the chronograph. I am not a chronograph fan. I started my watch journey really liking the chronographs a lot. When I started getting into mechanical watches and I got a mechanical chronograph, I had a pretty negative experience with one. I have one mechanical chronograph. Actually, I have one chronograph period in my collection. Well, I'll hedge. The G-Shock technically is a chronograph. So I guess I have two. I have one mechanical one. It's a Zenith. And I almost sold that a couple of months ago. I decided to keep it because it wears really well, but I don't use the functionality very much. And I'm one of those people where if I'm not using the watch, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to keep it or not. So the problem is all of the most iconic looking watches, Chronomat aside, are all chronographs. So it's like, will I really use it? Am I going to wear it all that much? And I guess that would be item number 4 is, even though I like the look of the Breitling so much, I don't know how often I'm going to wear them. They've got plenty of sizes that are reasonable. The price points, as you can see here, even new on the ones I've listed, are all under 10,000 US. If I were to pull the trigger today on a Breitling, it would probably be a Chronomat because the servicing isn't going to have the chronograph side. I'm not going to worry about that. I've heard very good things about the B01 chronograph, but I just don't think I would use it. And I don't really want to pay the extra, $3,000 plus that Breitling seems to charge whenever they stick a chronograph movement into one of their watches. So the option number 2 would actually be a Navitimer, but it would be a non-chronograph Navitimer. But that's kind of where I've been at with Breitling. And I do see we have Marcelo, if I'm saying your name right, Marcelo Time. So hello, welcome, good evening to a very atypical time for me to stream, but I figured it would be fun to go ahead and do this, and I'll do another topic tomorrow. Saying, I had the Chronomat 41 GMT with the B04. I needed to pay for overall double because I bought the watch used. I think you probably meant used. So I abandoned the brand. This is because the prices and in the gray market is nearly 60% off, and maybe that's why they charge double for the service if you don't buy new. Oh, interesting. Okay, so they charged you more for the service because you didn't have it new, is my interpretation. That's interesting. I was going to say I'd never heard of that, but my servicing experience has been fairly limited. I've used third-party, like local watchmakers for some of my stuff, which I've consulted with them a few times on some like old vintage pieces. And then my Explorer 2, I did take to the Rolex dealer that I did not buy them from. I bought it from a local jeweler who was selling used ones. But they have like a price menu, Rolex does, so through the 80s. And it was like, it didn't matter if it was new, it didn't matter who you got it through. There were just fixed prices if you weren't doing it under warranty. Then all my warranty services has been done by whoever the warranty has been through. So anyway, long story short, Breitling is one of those iconic brands that I kind of, as a collector, feel like I should have or like have experience with. I have no qualms about letting go of a watch brand and moving away from it. It just feels like a weird one to have skipped. Kind of like I've skipped Tag Heuer. I never owned a Tag. And that feels a little odd. A lot of people started with Tags in terms of their luxury watch journey. And I've never actually had a Tag. And there are Tags that I like. Spoiler, Tag is not in this list. So we won't be going over that. In fact, because there are no other chat messages to catch up with, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the second one. So we're going to move way more. Well, I guess it's relative, but we're going to move more up market price wise. We're basically going to more than double our pricing and jump into the next one away from Breitling. And good evening, Trap Vision. I hope things are going well for you. I know I've caught a couple of your live streams recently. And welcome to this evening's stream of me talking about 5 brands. They're going to be a variety of price points, all relatively expensive, though, in terms of they'll all be kind of plus $1,000 watches that I've never owned the brand, though, but I would like to. It's like, and I ask myself, why haven't I done it? And price is sometimes one of those reasons. In fact, that will be part of the reason we will jump to brand number 2, which is Blancpain. Oh, I like so much about Blancpain, except their pricing. And that's really the biggest barrier. So if you want to talk about luxury dive watches, Blancpain is almost always the brand that gets talked about in the second breath with, people say Rolex, and then they're going to say Omega most likely. But if you want to emphasize the luxury side of the luxury dive watch, the 50 Fathoms is going to be mentioned. So because I'm sure there are some better finished, higher end, haute horology dive watches. But in terms of like tool watch, but luxified and on an industrial scale, like they make a lot of them, it's always Blancpain that I hear about. Better finished than a Submariner, much more expensive new than a Submariner, though you can readily get the used models for less than Submariners tend to go for, depending on what you want. But I'm actually not just a regular 50 Fathoms fan. In fact, that's my least favorite version, though I do like it a lot. And that's why you see it on the far right end here of a 50 Fathoms Automatique. I picked one of the new models, the newer models, the 5010s, because they're more wearable now. So the challenge with the 50 Fathoms historically, and why I hadn't looked at a lot of Blancpain for a long time, is they wear very, very big. There are certain brands that are just known for being very large watches. And maybe the whole catalog isn't large, but the stereotype remains. Invicta is known as a very large watch brand. Ulysse Nardin is known as a very large watch brand. And Blancpain is known as a very large watch brand. Maybe not with the Villeray in the middle, but you see the Villeray is the most expensive. That's their dress watch line. I actually think Blancpain has a very nice dress watch line, and it's very underrated. It's kind of like JLC and their Master Ultra Thins and such. I think they are underappreciated watches for what they are. With JLC, it's all about the Reverso, which I also am a big fan of. But JLC has some very nice, handsome, round dress watches, and they go for a lot less used than new. So it's a good path to go down if you're really interested in something that's a luxury dress watch, but you don't want to like get into Vacheron or Patek or that sort of thing. Blancpain's right there. And I actually, in some ways, I think Blancpain has a better looking watch if you're going to add complications. And that's why I've given you a model here in the middle on the screen showing off the moon phase at the 6 o'clock position. It's a date as well. You've got actually got the dates are around in the inner portion of the dial, but then inside towards the 12 o'clock position, but just north of the center is where you actually can see the day and then the month. So I actually think it's a really well done layout. It's actually relatively busy in terms of the amount of information. I know some people don't like discs for dates combined with pointers. They want them all one way or the other, but I disagree, and I think that this watch does it very, very well with the Roman numerals even integrated with the date being on Arabic style. So I think it looks really, really good. Obviously, I don't like the $29,000 price point, but the Villarays do not go for more used. They, like almost every dress watch, they fall through the floor. In terms, it's still going to be 5 figures, but they do go down quite a bit. The watch I've actually looked at the most has been a Bathyscaphe, because the Bathyscaphe was one of the few watches that was around 43 millimeters. They had 38 millimeters as well, but actually wearable for like a normal mortal. The 50 Fathoms for a long time was a 45 millimeter watch. Even if the lug wasn't obscene, it just felt too big to me. The one I've got up on the screen, I believe, is a 43. It's basically the same size as the Bathyscaphe. So the Bathyscaphe is actually a subcategory of the 50 Fathoms. It's designed to be a more vintage diver. Again, somewhat controversial. A lot of people do not like the hour markers, like at the 2 and the 1, and they don't like the round ones. They're too nipple shaped. I think it looks fine for that watch. This watch actually you can get with complications, and it looks pretty good busy too. But I've always favored the more simplified version. Not the biggest fan of the syringe hands, but I don't know. It's a quirky look, but a lot about the shape and such. And you can get in a lot of different materials like titanium and ceramic and such. So now that the regular 50 Fathoms is I call this the regular on the right, is available in smaller sizes. Once again, I look at it, but you see it starts at $20,000. And yeah, I mean, the bigger ones would fall to around 11 or so. So you get them a little bit less than a gray market, no date sub. The Bathyscaphes you can usually find around, I don't remember last time I looked. I think they were kind of, I think this is a ceramic version I've got here on the screen. So this $13,700 watch trades more for around 8,000 gray. Not used, but gray. I think used, I've seen them about 1,000 less than that. So anyway, it's just one of those things, but it's a brand that I like a lot about the look of. I mean, you get gold rotors. The movement is incredibly well finished for an industrial finished movement. It's obviously Rolex generally doesn't even show you their movement. It's way better than Omega's movement. But they're kind of quirky. Like the Bathyscaph's a quirky looking watch. So I never pulled the trigger on it. And it's the most affordable one used. The Villaray, I just have other dress watches. And obviously, if you want one with all these complications, the price point moves up quite a bit. And then the regular 50 Fathoms was just too big for me. Plus, Blancpain asks for, I feel, way too much price point wise. While I am praising their movement finishing quite a bit, it's not Glashütte Original good. So, and Glashüttes can be had for less than Blancpain. So that's another thing that kind of pulls me away. And I'm not a huge fan personally of the CQ, but that's another dress watch that one could really start looking at if you wanted to spend less money than a Rolex sub and get something that's going to have some movement finishing and such to it, or at least some of their other models do. But I'm kind of rambling a little bit on it, but it's a brand that I keep looking at. I don't care about that. I know there was one of the Periscope had a thing about Blancpain's advertising, and the brand doesn't date back as far as the name claimed. They claimed the name dated back. I do not care about any of that. The history of Blancpain is dead. This brand was revived in the 80s. Whatever loose tie to history people want to try and hook onto makes about as much sense as leaning into the history of ball watches when its ownership chain was broken a long time ago. It's not owned by the same entity. It's not. Very few brands can trace themselves back beyond just the name living on. So I don't care about that stuff very much. I care about what their products look like today. And I like that they seem to finally be listening to the community and getting things to a smaller size while still offering their big watches. There are bigger wristed people that want some big chunky watches, and that's great. They should be able to access those. But the 50 Fathoms for a long time, you couldn't get under 45 millimeters unless it was a limited edition. And their limited editions, you thought Seiko and Omega were bad. Their limited edition markups on Blancpain are ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So Anyway, but I still think it's a cool looking brand. So let's see. Skate Reel is teaching me how better pronunciations or how he wants me to say. I think I'll just say hi horology moving forward. Trap Vision says he likes the 50 Fathoms. It's a it's one of those iconic divers, right? The Rolex Submariner, the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and Zodiac Seawolf, right? Those are the three that are kind of credited with popularizing mechanical dive watches back in the day when they were critical for diving. Skate Reel says, for Blancpain, it's about the dress watches for me. 50 Fathoms is nice, but not $10,000+ nice. Rather get a Seamaster for that. And that's kind of been I've had a Seamaster. I did finally sell mine off. Again, there were some, aesthetically, I liked it. There are just some other things about the wearing of the watch that didn't work great for me, and I wasn't wearing the watch all that often. I would, between a 50 Fathoms and a Submariner, get a Submariner, but that's because I like the overall design look better. It doesn't have anything to do with the finishing, where Blancpain wins. It doesn't have anything to do with the price, where used Blancpain wins over Rolex, used or new. But there are some design decisions that I do not love. I'm not anti-430 date window, which you can see here on both the Bathyscaphe and the regular 50 Fathoms, but a lot of people, that's going to alienate them too. I know tons of people hate the 430 date window, but I'm okay with it. But I'm just me. Space G95 says, evening to all. So, hey, Space G95, I'm glad that you are here and you think that Blancpain is awesome. So, excellent. We got some Blancpain love in the chat, though obviously not a lot of love for their price. Not that I can blame anyone for that. So let's take the pricing down more. We'll move on to brand number 3. There's still going to be luxury pricing, but I do want to go ahead and explore something that is, for a lot of people, within reach, even they have to save up for it quite a bit. And I see Trap Vision says Zodiac is the most obtainable. I had a Zodiac. And I actually talked about them on my last week's video of brands I won't own again unless they change their ways. So it's brands I currently won't buy again. A more negative topic, but unfortunately, I did not have the best experience with the Zodiac. But I do like that they and Doxa, who I know for really colorful looking watches. I've never owned Doxa. Zodiac, I think, is more playful than Doxa. Doxa is a little more straight-laced with their colors. Zodiac is a little more summer fun with theirs, would be kind of how I would go ahead and summarize that. And I just noted also that Skate Reel said, it's crazy how people hate the 4-hour date window. It's a symmetry thing. That's where it is. It's just, and Space G95 kind of hits on it about it blending well. And that's where for a lot of people, there's an asymmetry to it. And the problem, I think, for people is there's nothing there. It's about balance, I think. And so they see the 430 and there's not, or 4, if you want to say, it depends on the watch. So let's say 4, it's easier to think about. There's nothing over at the 8 to balance it, or there's nothing over at the 10 to balance it. And that's what people are looking for, is some sort of balance. One of the biggest gripes about Grand Seiko when they put the power reserve on the dial is that power reserve kind of resides over at the 730 position on the spring drive watches. There's nothing that balances it. The only other thing on the watch besides the hands is the date, and the date's at the 3. So people don't like, the asymmetry doesn't appeal to them. And I get it. But by that same logic, most 3 o'clock dates should piss people off just as much, because there's usually nothing over at the 9 to balance it. So you would think only dates at the 6, or arguably even at the 12, would be allowable. And actually, that bringing up dates at the 12 is a great segue. So this actually all worked out for me to jump into my third brand, which is Longines. So this one is probably the most shocking one that I've not owned, because I have liked so many Longines designs, so many of them. They have so many good watches. And while I've shown you 3 that are kind of higher priced watches of theirs, they do have more affordable watches. They have watches that are on Joma Shop, so unworn gray market watches, especially some of their dive watches, that are under $1,000. There aren't very many, but there are some. So Longines should be a brand, just based off the fact that I've praised so many of their designs, that I should have owned, because I have bought I've bought a lot of watches that cost more than this stuff new, and you can find this stuff for less than new. So it doesn't. I'll dive into it. Pun somewhat intended, though. I don't have a dive. I don't have in my view, a true dive watch here Well, no, none of them have a dive bezel here on the screen. So I've actually picked 3 because, again, this is one of those brands where it's not one model. That's part of the reason why it's so surprising that I've never really embraced anything. I've never embraced anything enough to own it from Longines. So in the middle, you see the Conquest Heritage Central. That's one of their newer watches. Date up at the 12, but it works. Of course, I see radial brushed gray dial. You know me and gray dials. Well, if you watch this channel, I like gray dials a lot. I like sunburst radial brushing a lot. This has that. The gilt looks really good on it. $3,800. Yeah, it's pricey, but this is not going to hold. So I could probably find a used one or a gray one. They might even have them gray now. I don't know. It may not be old enough yet, but within a year, it should be no problem to find. Master Collection Moonphase on the left. This is not the best example because I don't like the cropped 6, but I wanted to go ahead and cite it because that's a collection I have looked at a lot. And everything else about the watch, from the blued hands to the font that they used for the Arabic hour markers, all works really, really well. And then probably the one I've looked at the most is the Spirit Zulu Time series. I've gone ahead and thrown the titanium version up on the screen. It's the most expensive one that of the 3 I'm presenting to you. But again, these are just examples. These are not 3 watches I specifically want. They're just 3 watches that overall I like a lot about what's been done to kind of represent the brand. But I think the handset, the font, the way they've loomed those numerals, so they actually has a 3-dimensional depth to them, looks really good. Even with like the 5-star, like we're giving ourselves a 5-star rating on Yelp or whatever on at the 6 o'clock position. They tried to do a balance thing. That those stars are trying to balance the logo of Longines with the wings. That's what that's trying to do. So, because you see the span of those stars, it's like the span of those wings. So there's actually, there's 3 lines up at the 12. There's 3 lines of stuff down at the 6. Centered 6 o'clock date window to not throw off symmetry. Everything that they've done is trying to appeal to those basic design motifs that people look for. So the one in the middle and the one on the right in particular would be specific models I would be into, but these collections are ones I have looked at repeatedly. So why have I never bought a Longines watch? There's been a mix of reasons. One, almost everything I like in their collection, I already have a watch that already does the function. So Spirit Zulu Time is a GMT watch. I have a Rolex Explorer 2. I've had one for 18 years. I've never owned another GMT watch because every time I think about it, it's one of those functional things where I'm like, am I really going to wear multiple GMT watches? I mean, as a watch enthusiast, the answer can be yes, I can do whatever I want and wear what I want when I want. But they're a pain to set all the time and all the rest of it with the dates and stuff. So it's like, I've never wanted to have more than one watch with that complication. So there's been that. Another thing is almost all of the really cool complication Longines watches are thick boys. Some of them are extremely thick. And that's because, again, to keep these price points where they're at, these are basically eBosch movements. Granted, Swatch owns ETA and owns Longines. So they get a Longinified version of an ETA, but it's a lot of modules. So they stack modules on the watch, which is fine, except the watch gets thicker or has to be thicker the more modules you apply to it. So Longines, unfortunately, is the brand of modules. And so if you want a lot of complications, like you want to start adding in GMT functions and moon phases and date windows, all of a sudden the watch is getting up like over 15 millimeters thick. I don't like thick watches. And so, especially if it's not like a dive watch, then I'm really questioning why the watch is so thick. So, I mean, I know logically, I know the answer. It's a technological hurdle. They're not doing a specialized in-house movement where things are operating on the same plane. They're just sticking more modules on like a sandwich. That gets really big. Their chronographs are absolutely the worst. If you get one of their chronos with other functions on it, it's just a nightmare of thickness for me. I'm not even going to try one on. I've tried thick watches on like that from Swatch Group, and it's terrible. It's terrible for me. Your mileage may vary. So those have been the main things. So it's been a thickness thing, and everything that they've got, I already have other watches in the collection, and I just don't know if it wins out. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, I want it. And then I think, but if I get it, am I really going to wear it after the honeymoon period? Because if I'm not, I'm going to want to trade it or sell it. And it's just a pain in the butt to do that. And so I just try and be more judicious about about making buys like this, and they're priced high enough where I wouldn't get one of these Longines on a lark, right? It's not like a sub $500 watch where I might just shrug and go, you know what, let's just take a gander and try it out. I might even do that for one that was under 1,000. And I've looked at some of their dive watches and thought, you know what, I could just go ahead and try it and get one of the really older model ones that they're clearing out, but I just never do. But let's see what you guys have to say about Longines, not just hear me prattle on. So Trap Vision says, I absolutely love Longines. Well, it is a very loved brand. I would say it is one of the most loved Swatch Group brands. Swatch Group actually gets a lot of love. I think Swatch Group as a group doesn't, for a lot of various reasons, but we know Omega is deeply loved. Collectors, there's a lot of fondness out of the collector community for Longines and Tissot. And then I would say a lot of people that are more in the higher dollar collector category that like more obscure things, Glashütte Original gets a lot of praise. And then there's some dress watch aficionados that actually do acknowledge that Breguet makes really good watches, even though Swatch is totally mismanaging the brand. And I would agree with that too. But so there's a lot of Swatch stuff. I was going to say, what's a Swatch brand that's really, really hated? Don't know if there's one that's outright hated per se. I suppose there's a frustration with Swatch, regular Swatch, just because they're some of their stuff seems a little overpriced for what it is, but I don't know. Space G95 says, exactly. Not like we're getting back to the 4:30 and 4 o'clock date windows we were discussing. That's what this is clearly about, saying exactly, not like the Longa 1, asymmetrical, but hits the golden ratio. Yes. A. Longines, when designing the Longa 1, did a number of iterations to make sure they got the mathematics right. I think it works really well, but I have met others who they don't, golden ratio or not, they hate the Longa 1. They hate that asymmetry. I love the Longa 1's asymmetry. I think it's one of the best executions of asymmetry. And if you want another still expensive but far more affordable example, the Pano line from Glashütte Original. I don't know if they golden ratioed it, but I think it looks pretty well balanced. So those are my two favorite asymmetry watches, and I've owned both, but I don't have the Pano anymore. Too redundant to have two that were kind of doing the same spirit of the same thing. Some of the stuff Geo does I like better. Like they actually get the date discs. They're on the same plane for their big date. So when you look at a Longa 1, the big number or the number on the left is the blank or the 1 or the 2 or the 3. It's actually on a lower plane because the discs would basically overlap. So they stacked them like a module. And so it's okay. It looked better in person than it does in photos, but there's a depth to it, and it's kind of like doesn't look as clean as if they were on the same plane and they're perfectly even. And you see when you can see the disc's edges at certain angles, you'll notice it. So one of those things. Trap Vision says, I was just looking at the Master Collection Moon Phase. Yeah, I picked this one because I liked the kind of guilloche pattern they did on this, and the moon phase. It's not whimsical per se. It's not like sad moon or happy moon, but it's a really like clean moon. It's bright. It's easy to see. The module highlights itself. Another thing is, even though I don't like the cropped 6, and I wish they had just not put the 6 in at all, so I kind of wish I'd grabbed a different example, it was one of the cheaper watches to show off. Also, I like that the date is what looks like a small seconds, but this is actually a central seconds watch. And this little hand is actually, it's a pointer date. So the date is down there at the 6 o'clock. And I think that's a really nice execution for a date. I've seen other brands do it as well. I just think it's interesting because it's a good way to give you that small seconds look without actually using the small seconds. And they avoid that whole question of, well, where do we put the date disc? The answer, don't do a date disc at all. Do a pointer and work your way around it. Pixel Punch, hello, long time no see. That middle dial is very nice. Yes, in terms of the dial finishing, the Conquest Heritage Central of these three is absolutely my favorite. But again, I wanted to show an assortment because I think all three of these dial textures look really good. So Trap Vision says, I've handled that Spirit Zulu Titanium. It has a very, very balanced feel. I will own it one day. I've wondered, now the GMT alone without like a chrono or anything, it's not, thickness wise, I don't think it's too bad. Plus this one being titanium, and as you noted, the one you handled was titanium. having had a couple titanium watches, if weight is an issue, titanium almost assuredly will resolve it if you've only handled like a steel watch before. Titanium is very, very light. So if the watch is maybe, if your concern is that it's going to be top heavy, titanium might solve the problem for you. If your concern is that you want to be able to slip it under a dress cuff, try something of that thickness on. It doesn't really matter what the material will be. You'll understand if it can go under a cuff or not. Space G95 says, I like the stars more than 5 lines of text. Yes. Some watches seem to turn into novels. I do think that the Zulu time could probably look better if they dropped it down a couple lines of text. Like, it's like, what would you get rid of? I would get rid of chronometer, and I would get rid of automatic at the 12. And then you'd have Zulu time and the stars, and then Longines and the logo up at the top. And I think that would look a little better, but it's not too much there. It's one way or the other. Tactical Truth, welcome to live stream, says, get the Conquest Heritage. It's of the 3, if I were to pull the trigger right now on a Longines, it would be that one, because it is unlike anything else in my collection. The central disc here, if you can see my mouse, is, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the power reserve. So it's got a central disc power reserve display. Again, a very interesting, balanced way they've applied symmetry to a power reserve. How many other brands do symmetry with a power reserve? I can't think of any. There probably are some, but I can't think of any. People either don't put a power reserve indicator on at all, or they start doing what Gray and Seiko has started to do and hiding it on the back because they got tired of everyone criticizing where they put it on the front. Let's see. Moving on to chat. Space G95 says, put it on the case back. Oh, the power reserve? Or are we talking about the date? I don't know what we're talking about. But yes, we could always put things on the case. Oh, all the time. We put the stars on the case back. Skate Reel says, sounds like a good time to change up the GMT in your collection. I've lightly considered it, but at this point, I've had the Explorer 2 for so long. It was my first luxury watch I ever bought. So, it's one of those where I'm not really bound by tradition on a lot of stuff. I've let go of watches I've had for years. That one, I don't know if I could let go of that one. Maybe if it makes me mad at some point, but I've owned it a long time. So I haven't thought about upgrading it to a newer model or anything. It's the watch I use for travel. Skate Reel says, Longines Heritage Sector Black Dial is pure class. Koji, welcome to the live stream. And thank you, Koji, for being a 99-cent club member. For those who are interested, there is a link in the video description to that. But what would probably be easier and far more affordable than 99 cents a month is just to click the like button there. I remember to do my like plug for once. Anyway, Koji says, vintage Longines is a great, much more affordable alternative to Patek Philippe. Their modern pieces that are inspired by the vintage catalog is how it should be done, in my opinion. Pixel Punch continues, saying, my only gripe with the Longines is the larger case sizes around 40 millimeter for their dress models. Might work for some, but not my smaller wrists. It's, again, I don't judge them too harshly for doing things like that, because we have to remember some people have larger wrists, and well, sometimes I get frustrated too. Vacheron Constantin is a case in point. Their patrimonies, so many of them are 40 millimeters and larger, but I have friends who have like 8-inch wrists, and they would never consider a JLC or a Longa or whatever that's too small, but they would consider a Vacheron or a Longines because the watch is big enough and they don't feel like it gets lost on their wrist. So they should do multiple sizes. That's really the answer. And then we both win. Speaking of winning, Space G95 says, panorama date for the win. Yes. And I do like how Glashuta does not call their date the big date. It's a panorama date. And they've really done an excellent job making it a true panorama. Tactical Truth says, looking at the Heritage, I think that puts me off the date window at the 12 o'clock position. Scratch my earlier statement. That was a weird choice. I like it. I think it's creative. It maintains balance, but it's one of those things. It's kind of like showing someone a map or a globe, but you put it upside down so that the South Pole is at the top, and you tell people that because it's still accurate. We're just saying, we're just indicating that South is up instead of down, but people mentally can't like you can't rationalize it. It's too atypical. And I've seen a number of watches with a date at the 12. And generally speaking, people, I say more people than not go, why didn't they just put it at the 6? Especially in this instance where there's plenty of room to have put it at the 6. Like there's just text down there. They could have just shifted that around. That's probably my least favorite thing, though, is not actually the date at the 12. It's the mix of fonts. So the scripted of Conquest, I don't really like that all that much. It wouldn't be enough to stop me from getting it. I don't love it. The only watch I can actually think of where I think the script, they have typed out fonts and then they have a script style font, cursive style font, is Super Seawolf. It's the only one that seems to work well with the watches that I've looked at. Almost all the other times it looks a little incongruous, or I don't know. I feel like that word works, but we'll see. Tactical says the Heritage is a lovely watch, and also says exactly regarding the map illustration. Yes. Well, I mean, it's a totally understandable scenario. And I always want North to be up on maps and stuff. So it's unless it's following my own perspective, like using Google Maps and stuff, and then it needs to have the compass showing me where the actual North is because I want to be able to place it and be aware. But we do not put our globes upside down in this house. No siree. Okay, so we're doing 5 brands. We've done 3 already. We've done Breitling, we've done Blancpain, and we just finished Longines. All right, so we're going to move up more in the price bracket here and go to brand number 4. This is a brand I have talked about a number of times for a variety of reasons, mostly on the dress watch side, but they actually have sports watches as well that I really do appreciate, and that is Chopard. So Chopard is known as a jewelry brand, kind of like Cartier, though not nearly as successful, at least not nearly as successful when it comes to watches. However, they have a number of models that I do like a lot of. Now, I usually like to talk about the LUCs or the LU Chopards because those are the dress watches. By and large, they're the dress watches. That's where all the good dress watches of theirs live. However, they do have more than that. And a lot of people would talk about the Alpine Eagle. So you see, I have 3 examples here of Chopard watches at a variety of expensive price points. Again, most of these watches trade for less, gray and used, not the LUC 18, not the LUC 1860. Now, I'm going to start with that one. So it's the most expensive. They don't make very many per year. It's a steel watch, lucent steel. It is a Geneva sealed movement. Not very many brands do Geneva seal movements anymore. Vacheron's the most famous one that does. But Chopard does on some of their watches. Not even all of their LUC watches are Geneva sealed, but they did do it on the 1860. That's part of the reason why the price is so high, even though it's a steel watch. This watch was my absolute favorite watch, specifically with the salmon dial, was my favorite watch of Watches and Wonders 2023. So I love the guilloche look to it, the dolphin handset, the fairly aggressive arrowhead hour markers that they've gone with, the subdial at the 6 o'clock. About the only thing I don't like is I wish they didn't have printed automatic on that date. Instead, just had some more fun with the guilloche. That's about it. I don't have a picture of the movement for you. The movement is gorgeous if you care about that. All their movements generally, all their LUC movements look good. Do a side-by-side if you want at some point of an LUC non-Geneva versus the LUC Geneva. And it's fascinating because if you look at the non-Geneva sealed movement, you'll be like, this looks really good. And you look at the one with the Geneva seal, and even without like a macro up close stuff, you will see it looks better. I was shocked at how much better it looked. It just looks more refined. It's about the only way I could quickly describe it. But anyway, one of my favorite, I know this is focused on brands, but one of my most favorite models that I have ever seen come out is this LUC 1860, these new ones. I don't actually like some of the older ones as much. They have a date window, kind of like what you see with the LUC GMT 1 Black, but I just don't feel it fits as well. It feels a little broken. It breaks the design some. This is a weird one. This is not one I've really looked at a lot, but I wanted to use this as an example because, again, I think you see Chopard, and this is often, I feel, common with jewelry brands that get into watchmaking in a serious fashion. They can apply some fairly interesting design choices that actually seem to work fairly well when you start to examine it, but on the surface of it, it just feels different and maybe a little weird. So it's another GMT watch. So am I likely to get it? No. However, the date window does, they even carved a line around the edge of it. So it feels deliberately placed. It's highlighted in a way. It's not a color matched date window to the rest of the dial. So it's meant to stand out, but they emphasize it in a way. It's sort of like just doing a cutout for a date versus framing it. Framing a date makes it look a lot better, even if it makes it stand out. It's okay for the date to stand out, for me, in my opinion. But you don't want to ever make it look like you just took a hole punch and then the date's showing through it. It just looks lazy. This looks like it's a very deliberate design. You have a very interesting kind of pencil style handset, other than this broad arrow for the GMT. But unlike what you would see out of so many GMT watches, this one is meant to look very attractive and not stand out. It's not like an orange or a red. It's designed to be kind of a dress watch style look, but it's still really easy to see it because they've done this vertical brushing on the center of the dial, and this sort of matte black for the GMT hand stands out very distinctly. The arrowhead makes it very easy to see which hour it's pointing to. It's not doing an external bezel, which is very atypical for a GMT watch. So you have a double crown setup because one of those is to adjust that those time zones at the chapter ring. So it's just got a lot of interesting design choices. I just thought this actually is a very clean look. I probably would never buy this model, but it is a very clean look that is different for something that could be seen as very busy on the surface of it. Even these interesting choices like twisting the 3 and the 9, just to give it this other design flair, to Chopardify it. And then the Alpine Eagle. I love the Alpine Eagle. I almost bought one. So I was actually closest of all these to buying an Alpine Eagle, even though this is almost a $15,000 watch new. If you want to start looking used or gray, you can find these things under 10,000. So it's a very nice watch. I think at a distance, someone might look at the flanks of the watch and think Nautilus. They might look at the bezel of the watch and think Royal Oak, but when it's all combined, it doesn't look like any of those. I think the Girard Perregaux Laureato looks far more like a Royal Oak clone than this looks like either of those. I love the eagle eye dial texture to these. There's actually a salmon dial version of this with no date. Came out, Watches and Wonders 2023. It lost out to the 1860 because the 1860 is so elegant, but it is a very nice looking watch. So there are versions without the date if you hate this sort of 4:30 date window option. But I think they did a really good job with the date here as well. And it's interesting to see a sports watch with giant Roman numerals and it still feel like a sports watch. So why have I never bought a Chopard? A few reasons. One, well, I liked the Alpine Eagle. I didn't like it as much as the Parmigiani Tonda PF. So this watch just lost out to another watch. And how many integrated sports watches do I want? Currently I want one. So that kind of kills that one out. The LUC 1860, this with the Lucent steel and all that, it's unobtainium right now. It's waiting listed. They just don't make very many. I don't remember how many per year. 200, I think, was what they said they were going to make a year. So it's just too hard to get. So, I have no pull with a Chopard dealer because I don't buy any Chopards new. So it's like I can't really get that one. And then again, I have no need for a GMT watch. I have looked at other Chopard watches. They are expensive watches. Even the older ones used, while you can get quite a deal on them, they are not cheap watches. And so none of the other designs I like what they're doing nowadays a lot better than their older stuff. They don't go as avant-garde as Parmigiani Fleurier did with its older stuff. So it's not that aggressive of a change up or anything. It's just their design language, I feel, has gotten cleaner as time has gone by. And I prefer that cleaner look. And so just the older stuff doesn't appeal to me. So those are kind of the three things that have kept me away from pulling the trigger on any of the Chopards. But I don't know if the LUC 1860 became available, that would be a tough one to say no to. I've hoped that they would do more of them. Even if I could live with other dial color changes and stuff and other metals. And they've played around. They've had new versions, but they've all been super limited. It's just difficult. It's so expensive anyway. I don't lose any sleep over it. But anyway, it's just one of those things. Trapvision says Chopard is rarely talked about on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. I don't know the reason. I think the reason is all the LUC stuff is pretty expensive. The Alpine Eagles are price competitive with a lot of integrated sports watches, but it's in that weird no man's land, right? It's not a hype version, so it's cheaper than Chopek, and Chopeks have been coming down a lot used. Their Antarctique line, which because I've looked at a few of those as well. Hats off to Chopard though; they get theirs under 10 millimeters thick. Chopard doesn't, or excuse me, Chopek does not, which has been that's kind of a sticking point for me lately. But yeah, it's not a Nautilus, it's not a Royal Oak, and it's not an Overseas even. It's cheaper than all of those, which is great, but it just, when you start looking and saying, okay, well, let's say you can't get, or you don't want to spend Overseas Nautilus or Royal Oak money, a lot of people turn to Girard-Perregaux and start looking at the Laureato, which is price competitive with this watch. And a lot of people probably like the design more. Maybe they feel like it's a little more, I mean, it came out in the same era as the Royal Oak did, so it's got its own heritage coupled with, it's easy to maybe think this is like a hybrid between, and the dial really sets it apart, but with the bezel screws and the flank profile, I think a lot of people probably feel like it's an homage between the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. I do not, or I feel they've done enough to it that I wouldn't be worried about that, but I just think it's in this weird boat where it's super expensive, but it's not a hype piece. So people that want an affordable integrated sports watch are going to look at like Christopher Ward's the 12 or the Tissot PRX. And if you're starting to get into 5-figure money, you've got Chopex to consider, you've got Parmigianis to consider, you've got Laureatos, which is what a lot of people are going to consider. And then if you're going to go up to $20,000, now you can, and especially if you're not going to get a blue dial, you can get an Overseas pretty easy. So it's just in a tough market there. Everything else, dress watches are just too obscure. So no one talks about on YouTube talks about dress watches because no one I'm stereotyping. No one on YouTube wears dress watches. They all just buy a bunch of sports watches. And so, I mean, I don't watch all the watch people on YouTube, but I might have one of the of a YouTuber. It's not a label. I do YouTube, so I guess I'm a YouTuber. I don't make my living off YouTube. I might have one of the biggest dress watch collections on YouTube, but I wear them to work. So I don't know. That's just, and Chopard, their best stuff's the dress watch stuff, in my opinion. Space G95 says, we were just talking about the Alpine Eagle and Traps Live this. Oh, interesting. Okay. I did not see it this morning. I was probably at work, but yes, it's the dials, if you ever get a chance to look at them in person, this render or photo or whatever I grabbed does not do it justice. They play, that eagle eye pattern really plays with the light. The texture is more robust than what it looks like in this image. So I just wanted to mention that. Texel Punch says the 1860 is attractive. I love the 1860 dial. One of my most favorite dials in all of watchmaking that I've ever seen. Trap Vision says, I've seen a few micro brands and independents homage that 1860. Yeah, I would say that basic dial look, the Baltic Prismatic is probably the one that reminds me the most of it, because they have pretty aggressive looking hour markers as well. And I think the handset's similar, and you can get a variety of patterns on it. So that's probably the one that would come to my mind as the closest. Tactical says, put on the GMT1 Black and watch Predator. Yeah, I know it's not the Arnie, but interesting choice for a dressy field watch. Nowadays, he might, if he does Predator 3, he might wear a Chopard. I don't know. Arnie will do whatever Arnie wants. Trap Vision says, Baltic has a model similar to that 1860. Okay, yeah, it's the Prismatic. I think that's the model line. Space G95 says, the bold date window makes sense on a GMT for crossing the international date line. Yes, I think that's why part of the reason they needed to emphasize it. It's just interesting because it's still a fairly conservative looking design for a watch that ideally is meant to let you tell the time in 2 different time zones as quickly as possible. And Tactical says, if you're going to drop $25,000, would you rather get the 1860 or a JLC Reverso? Right now, if I were to make the pick, I would pick the Chopard 1860 for two reasons. One, I already owned a JLC Reverso, not one that was nearly that much money, but back when I got my Reverso, they were a lot less than what Richemont is asking for nowadays. Here is the thing, though, that made me hesitate. My biggest problem with the 1860 at $25,000 is, while I think Lucent steel has this nice sheen to it and looks nice, it is still steel. I would rather it be gold. I want it in white gold for $25,000. Same price, $25,200. I want it in white gold. And solely because, honestly, if you're gouging me for that much, at least give me the precious metal. That's just sort of the logic of it. And I know at $25,000, a Reverso, even in today's Richemont market, $25,000 Reverso is going to be a precious metal Reverso. And I prefer dress watches to be precious metal. So that would be, so that, yes, but like, it's tough because I really do like Reverso a lot. And if I were to, I could see myself getting another Reverso. I just won't get the same model I once owned. But I really like that 1860. I prefer most Reversos, though, to most 1860s. It's only the really recent 1860s that I really like. I don't like the ones with the date windows on them. I've tried to like them. I've looked at a whole bunch of different ones from different years. They just don't work enough for me to want to spend the money. Koji says most Reversos are far less than 25,000, but I'd opt for the 1860. Well, Koji, if we want to talk $25,000, we probably need to move to our last brand. So we're going to go to the most expensive one. And price is one of the reasons why I have never owned this brand. So I know, big shock there. But let's go ahead and let's talk about Vacheron Constantin. So, all right, Vacheron. What, the weakest of the Holy Trinity, right? I don't know. My sympathies for Vacheron have grown more and more. Of the Holy Trinity, it is my favorite of the three brands. But that's pretty easy because, as we all know, Audemars Piguet is just the Royal Oak Company anymore. They don't make anything else that's any cool. Yeah, they do some new star wheels in the Code 1159, but most of the Code 1159 is not that great of a looking watch. I actually think they look okay, but it's in this weird, almost no man's land of dress watch meets sports watch meets too much money watch. And then Patek is super fuddy-duddy. Other than some Calatravas and some of their nice complications, I'd say 3/4 of the Patek catalog, I think, either looks like it's desperate. It's like, hey, fellow kids, Steve Buscemi Saturday Night Live going on here, where it looks like 60-year-old men were trying to figure out what 22-year-old men wanted to wear, and doesn't work for me for that reason. I'm looking at you fake denim, but really alligator leather strap Calatravas, up to just weird fuddy-duddy designs that just do not work anymore, for me at least. So Vacheron is a brand where, again, one of these things I've been emphasizing with these 5 brands is it's not just a specific model. They have watches that across the board that I really, really like. So starting with the leftmost one on the screen, the Traditionnel. So the Patrimony is probably their most famous dress watch line, but my problem with the Patrimony is I do not like the pencil hands that are on almost all of them. It's actually enough that even though the Patrimony is one of the biggest take a bath dress watches, and when I say take a bath, I mean when you look at how much they sell for new and how much they sell for used, you're like 50% plus off on a lot of those Patrimonies. And the reason, I think, is the design is not as nice as the Calatrava. And you look at them, and what's the biggest reason that is the case? And for me, it's the handset. The pencil handset does not make any sense to me for a dress watch like that. I'm not totally anti-pencil hand, but I don't think it works nearly as well as Dauphine. And we see, though, Vacheron has basically something that looks like a Patrimony. They're not as big as some of the Patrimonies, so larger risk people may not be able to consider the Traditionnel, but the Traditionnel looks like a Calatrava. It's Vacheron's version of the Calatrava. I think it looks great. Unfortunately, they don't go down nearly as much as the Patrimonies do. However, they do go for less than the $24,000 that they sell for at Vacheron. So that's one. It's their Calatrava style watch, simple 3-hander with a small seconds format, which is one of my most favorite formats for dress watches. So that has to be there. So I put it there because I just really like the design a lot. It's like a more affordable, but not by a lot, Calatrava. Middle one, the Historique American 1921. I came so close to buying this watch. Not I don't remember if it was a white gold or a rose gold. I like both of them. They have a really cool platinum one, by the way, as well. However, this version that I'm showing is a 36 millimeter watch, or a 36 and a half millimeter square watch. That I've tried that on. I tried it on at the Vacheron boutique in Dallas, and it wears a lot better for me than the 40 millimeter version, which is the one that is mostly out there. The 40 millimeter version cost about $7,000 more new. Used, they go for about the same, probably because they've been making the larger one for over a decade now. These little 36 millimeter ones only came out a couple of years ago. However, you can get them in white gold or you can get them in yellow gold. It's a weird design. Obviously, what's it? There's a small micro brand that has a much more affordable version. If you really like the shape and you're like, I ain't paying no $30,000. These used go for closer to 24,000. But you want something that's like closer to under 8,000. I can't remember which. It's a brand. It's not Baltic, but it starts with a B. They have a version of a watch that basically looks like this shape. So if you want this shape, you don't have to spend $1,000. You can get this shape with a much more affordable watch. However, it's very unique. The dial texture looks really, really good. You can kind of see it here, but the small seconds is actually like radial circles. So it actually has a different texture than the kind of media blast to the rest of the watch. And then the numerals are less like painted on, but with multiple layers. So it's like lacquered up thick. So there's actually depth to those numbers, even though they are not like applied markers. It's just painted on. So it's a very cool, weird, elegant style watch. It wears very well for my wrist size in the smaller format. So I just think it's a really, really cool watch. And then another historique. So two historiques, but what can I say? I didn't want to put an overseas in. I'm not really interested in the overseas. The historique's 222. Very expensive watch, sells for about the same used as it does new. It used to sell for more used, so you find them around $72,000 to $76,000, 74,000 new. All gold, 37 millimeter watch. This, I guess, in the realm of Grail watches, if I were to name a Grail watch, this is the watch I most want. So this actual one specifically that I would want a 222. A lot of people want the 222 to come out in steel. I think that would be great. I don't care. I want it in gold. I want it gaudy. I think it's small enough that it wouldn't look too stupid. I like it way better than the day date. And so, again, it's a throwback to one of their designs from the 70s. Again, it is an integrated style watch, but I think it's very, very cool. So Vacheron just has a lot of different looks. You can explore their historique catalog. They actually have a few other models. They all look really, really different. Like they've got other stuff. It doesn't look at all like the 222 or the 1921. But so why not pull the trigger on the Vacherons? Well, with a Traditionnel, I mean, the bottom line is I already have other dress watches. So it's like, where does it fit in a rotation? I don't have anything that looks like this. Like my Breguet doesn't look like this. My Parmigiani doesn't look like this. But nonetheless, I'm just like, I don't know. It reminds me so much of the Calatrava. I ask myself, should I not just save the additional, I don't know, $8,000 and get the Calatrava instead, which is one of the few Pateks that I like, at least some of the models. So I kind of rule it out for that reason. The 222 is so expensive. It's just like, that's like, maybe that should be a retirement watch. I don't know. It's hard to fathom spending that much money on a watch, quite frankly. And then the Historique, I still think it's too much. They've got other cheaper watches that use that same movement. They're charging an awful lot for just turning the dial on its side. Yeah, they do some other stuff to make the dial, but there's a markup there beyond their normal markup that bugs me. Again, I'm looking used. If I could get this under 20, I might pull the trigger, but I couldn't do it. There were some times where I found some beat up ones going for around 19, but not right now. And so I just think it goes for too much for what it is. So that's why I just not ended up, I just can't get it low enough, and I don't have enough to trade away that I would want to sacrifice for this watch. So as cool as it is, money is basically the barrier for almost all of this stuff. I suppose the traditional is really more of I already have a lot of nice dress watches. I have 3 core ones that I wear quite frequently. And while this looks different than all 3 of them, so it's not too cloney, it's just kind of like, I don't know. There's so many. It's a design motif that's pretty easy to find. I can get a JLC that will give me the same vibe. There's a lot of watches that'll give you this vibe. So that's really it. So money is really the big issue with Vacheron. What a shock. but most of these are, again, with Vacheron, it still takes a lot of money, but you definitely can find a lot of these secondhand with significant discounts versus what you're seeing. What you're seeing here are the website prices. So not the 222 yet. If the 222 comes out in steel, that's the real reason I went to come out in steel. If it comes out in steel, I bet you a lot of people dump these gold ones because they're too scared to wear them. They don't want to scratch them up. So a lot of people really want the steel one. And yeah, a lot of those are people that would never pull the trigger on the gold one. They want the steel one because the steel one will be a lot cheaper. But I think there are a lot of people that even got the gold one who in reality want a steel one. They want a steel integrated 222. Not the overseas, which is the modern version of the 222. It's the same bezel shape and all the rest of it. The overseas was meant to replace the 222. So, but some people really just like the 222 better, including me. So it's just one of those things. Okay, so let me go ahead and get caught up. So Koji had called it. Granted, I do have them listed in the video description because I've had some people go say, "What is with this stream? It's like over an hour long, and I want to know what you talked about." I'm like, I'll list it in the description so people will know. They still have to hunt around. Sorry. If you didn't watch it live and you're watching the recording, I'm sorry that's long-winded, but there's chat interaction. That's why it's got to go long-winded. I do some pre-recorded stuff that isn't nearly as long-winded. Koji continues saying, you probably love the La Historique 1942 model or the 1955. I'm going to missay this because I'm going to say it very American. Corne des Vaches Chrono VSM. I've probably seen it, but I can't think of it. In terms of the numbers don't draw up in memory to me. Koji says, can't go wrong with a 1921, of course. Yes, all except for the price. But yes, it's such an interesting looking design. It's just from the numerals. I think Tim Moss has noted it several times. Like these aren't Art Deco numerals. They're Art Nuevo. It's like the era just before Art Deco. So again, very cool. Yeah, I just think it's nice looking at a really weird font for numbers that is kind of, I guess, a sort of a romantic format. I don't know, an Art Nuevo format that, just it's not Breguet. It's like whenever we're doing, and I like Breguet numerals, they look great, but it's like, oh, we're going to do a classic looking watch. What sort of numerals should we throw on it, Breguet? Like, let Breguet do Breguet. My Breguet doesn't even have Breguet numerals on it. Like, just let Breguet be Breguet. We don't all need to do Breguet. There are other fonts out there that look really cool. Get some cool serifs and stuff going on. I don't know. Figure it out. Trap Vision says, I saw that 1921 on a collector 2 weeks ago. It is a really nice timepiece and pics don't do it justice. It is very cool in person. I looked at both the white gold and the yellow gold, or rose gold, I should say. They have made yellow gold ones. I tried on the white gold. They had them both out on the tray, but it's, the sizing is the same. So, and I actually went in thinking I preferred the rose gold. And when I looked at the white gold in person, I thought this actually looks really, really good. I'd say the biggest difference, I guess, if you're torn, like I'd be happy either way, quite frankly, is the white gold feels more modern. So rose gold is a classical looking color. But this is a classically shaped watch. So some people I think are going to prefer rose gold because it leans into that classic aesthetic. And others are going to be like, let's have a twist on it. We're going to have this classic looking watch, but we're going to make it be in this really modern looking metal. And I think it works either way. I do like this strap. Most of these come with, I think, with both of the strap colors are different with the 36 millimeters versus the 40s. So be aware of that. Some of the straps are designed to appeal, I think, were more designed for women. Like there's one that it might be I don't know if it's this one or not, like comes with a really bright pink strap. And then it comes with like a super conservative, like this brown strap. So they kind of, because the 36 obviously appeals to like any gender because of the watch size. A 36 square, it depends. The lugs aren't very long on this. The 36 here, the 36 and a half, it wears more. I'm trying to remember. I'd say it wears more like around 39 or 40. It wears pretty large. It's surprisingly substantial on a wrist. So if you normally like around a 40 millimeter, I'd say try that. If you normally like a 43, 44 millimeter, try the 40 because I think it's going to really fill out the wrist a lot better for you. Skate Reel says, sheesh, the watch brands you want are straight heavy hitters in the price categories. Vichy, Chopard, Blancpain, Gali. Well, I did Longines and I did Breitling. I mean, I don't know. I could do maybe 5 micro brands that I've never owned that I want. We could maybe do that if that's a fun video topic. But you know, when watches are more affordable, it's easier for me to just go ahead and get it. And then if I'm like, it didn't work out, like Zodiac, I let the watch go. Harder with the more expensive ones. But I see Travis saying that I have very fine taste. Let me just say, taste is real easy to have when you don't have to spend any money. So it's easy to love Vacheron from a distance. It's easy to love Blancpain from a distance. So that's one of the nice things about watches is if you can remind yourself, you don't have to own all this stuff and still appreciate it. But I, like a lot of people, also do get really frustrated when I go to certain watch websites and such, and I see them writing these massive articles about $1 million watches. That, to me, that just feels a little too distant. Like, I could envision saving up a certain amount of money, but I can't envision like mansion money for a timepiece. It kind of blows my mind. But it's been an interesting journey for me because there was a time where I didn't envision spending, 5 figures for watches, and that ship sailed. So, and maybe it shouldn't have, but it did. Tactical says, interesting. I was thinking about the day date with Jubilee bracelet compared to the 222. I do like day dates, but I do not like them as much. And the 2 main reasons is, one, the sizing, though. So you can get the day date in a 40, or you can get it in a 36. I have tried, and this 36 is the same size as the Datejust 36. So I've tried on the Datejust 36 to get the sizing, and it's okay. So I think that part isn't too significant of an issue, but I do like that the Vacheron is just a tad bigger, and integrated sports bracelets do wear a little larger as well. So again, it's kind of it's like, is the Datejust a dress watch? I mean, yes, it's in precious metal, but it looks like a sports watch. So that's where I kind of have that tug. That one wouldn't keep me away from it. The main reason is the date window. The date window on the modern ones. I've looked at some of the vintage ones. On the modern ones, they're not color matched. They're all white date windows. And at least the ones I've looked at, all of them. So like here, you can see this champagne dial has a champagne date window. There are like older Rolexes where there's a champagne dial and it looks like a champagne date window. It looks good. The modern ones, it's a stark white date window. And I just, at that price, I don't know, it just irritates me. Like, I never thought about it before, but again, I have an Explorer 2. I show you guys, if you didn't know what it was, I have a Polar Explorer 2. So my white date window is color matched to the date, to the dial. And so I never thought about Rolex doesn't color match, but they don't. And it feels cheap. And I'm okay with that on cheaper watches, but I'm not okay with that on $40,000 or $36,000 or whatever price we're talking about. And the modern, the cheapest Datejust new in box from Rolex are about $36,000. Now, that being said, the Rolex day date, when we start talking precious metal, we can talk about how expensive Rolex is all day long. At retail, and I know, not always easy to get stuff at retail, but at retail, the Rolex day date is one of the most affordable full precious metal bracelet watches there is. So, like, this is $74,000 versus $36,000 and something for the same color, 36 minutes, 1 millimeter smaller day date. And that's kind of true across the board. You look like what a Parmigiani Tonda Pia, like they make this watch in rose gold. Yeah, this is a 41 or whatever millimeter, but it's still, it's more than the day date. So Rolex actually has some of the most sane precious metal pricing that I've seen. Another case in point, it's not even just the bracelet stuff. Looking at the that platinum whatever that new, was it the 1908, the Platinum 1908 that came out. I didn't love the Platinum 1908, but I'll tell you what, retail for around $32,000 for a full platinum cased watch, that is on the low end. That's not on the high end. That is not in the middle. That is on the low end of a new in-box platinum watch. So it's just, if you can get it at retail, Rolex prices are some of the sanest when it comes to precious metal watches. And they're making a hefty penny off those precious metal watches. So the markups get very, very frustrating. Yes, the Vacheron, much like the Polo, I can't say much about the Polo, but the Geneva Seal movement, Geneva Seal case, yes, there's going to be a higher finishing standard to the 222 than to the day date. But it's not like the day date it's like some schlubby watch. Rolex makes a very competent timepiece. So anyway, I went on a little tangent there, but yes, it's one of those things. Like I would definitely consider a day date. So versus it's going to be far more affordable than a 222. That's where my dream is for the 222 to start hitting the used market, and then eventually, you find it at half price, and now it's around the price of a new day date, and then I would be able to more rationally say I'll get the 222. Space says, man, the Historique is just gorgeous. Love the driver dial design. Yes, it's really, some people, you want to talk about a little bit of flaws with these things. One of the things I know some people do not like, and I'll point it out if you haven't noticed it, because especially if you're looking on a smaller screen, it's harder to, and I'll put this as full as I can. The 60, it's like a regular small seconds. Yeah, it's over at the 3 o'clock, but you see the 60, it's aligned straight up like it would be on a normally fixed watch. It's not turned at an angle like the rest of the dial. That actually really pisses some people off. So for some people, they're like, they don't want that watch just because of that one issue. And you know what? At $33,400, that's a perfectly legitimate reason to reject the watch. I think it still looks cool, and that doesn't bug me. But it might bug you, so I'm pointing it out. And then if it does, you can say, wow, thank you. That saved me $33,000. Trapvision says, I'm going to an AD that has the 222 pre-owned. I've never seen it other than in still pics. Nor have I, Trapvision. When I was at the Dallas boutique, they did not have one. I asked them if they had one available to try on. They didn't have one in a display. And they said no. Now, I went to another dealer later. It was a multi-watch dealer, jewelry store. It was the Chopard dealer, in fact. And the guy there who was helping me, let me try on, I was trying on some Zeniths, and he said, oh yeah, no, he knows the people who work over at the Vacheron boutique. And he goes, I'm pretty sure they do have one 222 that they keep in a safe. But I was like, I don't think the guy coming in from Kansas on a trip who's like saying, hey, I'm here in town for a pinball convention. Can I try on your 222? I didn't really rise to the top of that list, even though I did put on my nicest packed polo that I brought with me. I did not wear my normal t-shirts when I went to there. They were more than happy to let me try on 1921s. They got plenty of those to try and get rid of, but 222s at the time were still more for preferred clients. So I think they are moving them, or having trouble moving them more now. So maybe easier to get a hold of. Let's see. Skate Rails talking to Trap Vision about never having seen one in real life. And that's, again, it would be a watch I would need. My mood, if it doesn't wear well, my mood will immediately change. So I have not tried it on. I just really, really like the look of it. And most of the stuff based off of the specs, the lug to lug, my experience with integrated sports bracelet watches and how far out the bracelets tend to go, and the general diameter of the watch tell me this watch is definitely not going to look too big for me. I really doubt it's going to look too small. It's a time plus date only watch, but I'm still not positive, and I would want to be positive at this price. So Trap Vision says he's going to report back with his experiences once he gets to see it. And Koji says it's 37 millimeters. Yes, it will probably fit really nicely. Yes, it is 37 millimeters. Space says that's pushing the bottom of his size limit. 7 3/4 inch wrist, 6'4". Yeah, it'd be like a toy. That's Tony, who's been on this channel a few times, who I do a podcast with on pinball. He has a very large wrist. His is 8 inches, I believe, is an 8-inch wrist. So he's like one of those people that, like, we were both there for that pinball thing. And so he tried on one of the like 41 millimeter Patrimonies. He's like, wow, it's a dress watch that actually wears really well. And so it's like, see, I didn't want to try on the Patrimony. It was one of those cool retrogrades though. So it was a really cool functional watch, but it's like, that's where they do need to have, I'm not one of those people that's saying, just make watches smaller. They do need to still do bigger watches, and they should do big dress watches too. It's just, I don't want to be left out. So, but in my case, I prefer a lot of the traditionals. The only thing is all that cool retrograde stuff, the traditionals don't do that. At least not the current ones. One watch I did not put on here because it's not in the modern catalog and the color configuration I like is the Malt. The Malt is the tonneau shaped case. Very cool looking watch. I came close to pulling the trigger on a few of those. There's a design I like with a slate gray dial. You know me and gray. And that's why I didn't show you one. Currently, they don't do the slate gray dials, but they're a very nice looking dress watch as well if you want an odder shape than any of this stuff. So if you like to know, it's definitely one worth checking out. And those go for a lot less used than they do new. I think even the ones I like, they're about 10,000 off used versus new. They trade for around 12 to 14 used, I think. I don't know what all the color schemes though trade for. There might be some that go for even less. Koji says it will certainly feel substantial being all gold, though. Yes, gold in the way. When I got my Longa 1, that was the first thing I really noticed was, even though it's on a leather strap, just how heavy the watch is. Now, part of that is probably because that's got the power reserve indicator and the big date. So there's some heft to the movement itself, and the movement's not gold on the Longa 1s. It's German silver. So Space G does the happy point up symbol. Trapfish says RM, so Richard Mille, is completely out of reach price-wise, so I understand that concept. I just can't get into the look of Richard Mille. I mean, it's a really modern look, and I think that's the issue. I just don't have that aesthetic drive, so I don't ever really look at them because the price is aspirational, but I just don't like the looks in general of the watches. But I know a lot of people do, and they like to talk about them. Space G says, all gold with a white date sounds lazy as hell. So that was my thinking, especially when I look at, and maybe it's the lighting. I don't think so, though. You go to like Bob's Watches or David SW, whatever, and look at some of the older ones. You don't have to go way, way back. Just look. They don't have to go all the way back to the plexiglass. I swear they were doing ceramic date discs on day dates, but look on their website now. It's all white. It's all white. And it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look as good as it could. I mean, look at, oh, I'm pointing the wrong way. Look at this 222's date. It looks so nice and blended in. And, but I whined about this last week with Omega. It's like, Omega Seamaster 300M. They're color matching the date windows, but then on the Aquaterras, they don't. And I don't get it. I thought the Aquaterra was like the elegant dive watch. Why is it not color matched? I think it looks not as good as it could. I don't want to say it looks bad because it doesn't look bad. It just doesn't look nice. I don't know. It's a me thing. All right. So let's see. Tactical says, great point on the color of the date window. Now I cannot unthink this. Again, just look at some of the older ones and you may find one that better suits your desire. Trapfish says, I tried on the 50th anniversary Platinum Daytona. It was super heavy. I have not. I've not tried on a huge platinum watch. I think Koji let me handle one of his platinum dress watches. It was a smaller piece, and it's still, platinum's got some chunk to it. Koji says, regarding the 1921, strangely enough, the original version is tilted the other way, and the small seconds is tilted. Not sure why they changed it. I know the 1921 Historique here is actually a blend of a couple of models. I believe it's the 1921, and then what is it, the 1920 or 1990? They kind of merged two concepts from their back catalog into one. And I have no idea why. I think maybe they just thought it better suited modernity. I'm not sure. We never really know what watchmakers are thinking. They kind of just come up with what they think we want. They don't generally consult us. So, DeRosa, welcome to the live stream. Late to the party tonight. Did you discuss the 39mm LUC Quality Fleury, the midpoint between the 1860 and that new Green Forest dial one? No. In fact, I'll go ahead and take us back. This is what besides the 1860, I did throw in one of their GMTs just to give a different view of LUC because they do stuff that isn't just dress watch, but I did not go into that one. I almost did the Green Forest dial one, but to me, the interesting comparison between the 1860 and the green dial one is talking about the movements, because one has the Geneva seal movement, the 1860, and the other doesn't. And they're both well-finished movements, but side by side, you can really see where the difference goes in terms of even at a distance. So since I wasn't showing that part, I didn't think anyone would really care. So I didn't, even though the green dial is kind of cool. I have a standalone video giving my first thoughts on that back when Watches and Wonders came out. So if you want to go back a few months ago in my video history, you can find it. But I don't know. Hardly anyone watched that video because it was Chopard, I guess. I don't know. It was still fun to do. Pocket Watch says, another late night stream. Who is this new dentist? This new dentist is exhausted and is about to stop the stream. And is hopefully not getting ill, but it's been a long week and a long day. So we were going over, this is my optimistic stream. We were going over the 5 brands that I have never owned, but I want watches from, and not just one particular watch, lots of different watches that have appealed to me. So we ended here with Vacheron, but I had done Chopard before that, talked about a few of the models I like from their LUC and Alpine Eagle line. We did Longines before that. Ignore the cropped 6. I was desperate to give a good example of some of the collections and just grabbed one, but this was the most affordable set that I covered that I've never owned, though, despite liking so many other watches. Blancpain. Blancpain was one I've come somewhat close to pulling the trigger on last year in particular. And Breitling's what I started with, where I came really close to buying a Breitling early last year. Especially, I was really looking at Navatimers. But so there's been quite a bit that I've considered, and I just never ended up deciding to get. And maybe I will at some point. You know, it's tough because every time I add a watch, everything else gets worn less. And so I feel pressure to get rid of watches, not because I have to, but because if they're not getting worn, with a few exceptions, like some of my novelty stuff. Like, I don't feel bad that I don't wear my Mr. Jones watches all the time. I don't feel bad that I don't wear my vintage Spiro Agnew watch all the time. Those, they're like there for the collecting side of it. But by and large, I want to wear them. So that drives almost all the decision making. And so even things I like, I have to go, well, am I wearing it enough? Even though I like it, maybe it should be let go to get another watch that maybe I'll wear more. And that's how I approach collecting right now. Only downside, of course, to that is you lose money. So just, as long as you can be comfortable with losing money on those on those transactions as you unload things that you don't want anymore, it can be a way to get time on watches and actually get to truly experience them and then make up your mind later. And so that's how I've been doing it. But let me go ahead and get some caught up with these final thoughts from the chat. DeRosa saying the 1921 has the same movement as the 28 millimeter Traditional. That's the same small seconds positioning. Yes, I couldn't remember which watches had that same movement, but that's one of my reasons I have not bought the 1921 is I don't like the price they sell it for basically not that, like, I don't think they're putting enough extra effort in for wanting a starting price at $33,000. I feel that watch is $10,000 overpriced from Vacheron because the Geneva seal on the movement can be had for less. The Geneva seal on the case can be had for less. So and I'm okay with all of that if it falls low enough on the used market, but it hasn't yet. So Tactical says, thanks for your thoughts on these watches. Will be interesting to see which of these you get. Right now, I'm not shopping for any of them. That's the interesting part. I'm not close to pulling the trigger on any of them. And see, DeRosa emphasizing that the 38 millimeter Traditional, and then the 38, not the 28, has a small size. Okay, that makes sense. Because I know the movement in the 1921s, the 40 millimeter 36.5. Those are the same exact movement as well. So if you don't like the movement being just a tiny part of the case, that's another reason to really look at the 36.5 millimeter version. Koji noting that makes sense. Trap Vision says he likes these type of live streams. Different perspectives are so welcomed. Pocket Watch Time says, I'm that way with IWC. Love the brand and history, just not much in their watches that makes me excited enough to purchase. Yeah, that's kind of where I ended with Breitling. Like the movement tech, well, the B01's a very respected chronograph. I don't like the price delta from their non-chronographs to their chronographs. A lot of the other Breitlings are using Bosch movements, which are fine, but they're asking a lot of money. So So, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars for a 38 hour power reserve as a general rule. It's stuff like that. Tactical says, would be interested to hear about your watch wearing rotation. I will, not as a live stream, but I will do a video on this. In terms of, I don't have a rotation in the traditional sense. I used to take my boxes and I would just go down the row and I would wear like Monday is this watch, Tuesday is that watch. And I'd go through however many the collection was, and that would be the cycle. And I would just cycle. And when I first started collecting, I didn't have as many watches. I would normally wear a watch for 2 or 3 days and then do that. But as I got more watches, I started to change them daily. That's my normal pattern now, is I change them daily, but I do not rotate that same way. The video that I'm talking about, which I'll do in 2025, is this starting this year. I have logged every watch wear on a spreadsheet. It's very nerdy, but hey, it's YouTube. So we're going to be nerdy, including if I changed watches like 3 times in a day, which I don't do much, but if I do, I have 3 entries for that day so that I can have a breakdown to know mathematically how many, what are my most worn watches. And I'll actually have the counts for it, because I've done my most worn watches as videos the last couple of years, but I always had to kind of do it off of my gut. I'm pretty sure my top 5 that I think of are my top 5. That's pretty easy to kind of feel, but how much, or if I had them in the right order, that was much looser, too loose. So I'm going to be able to do that. And based off of that, analytically, I can probably be able to tell you why those decisions were made the way they were. So currently what I can tell you is, by and large, it's my dress watches that have been getting my most wear. And that is not surprising, because I tend to wear a lot of button-down shirts to work. So I wear my dress watches to work by and large. When I wear polo shirts to work, it's a mix. Sometimes I wear the dress watch. Sometimes I'll wear something like today. I wasn't in this pinball t-shirt. I went to work in one of my work branded polo shirts, but I wore this steel sports watch because I was going to be walking around and we had a all staff event and all that. And I'm like, I'm going to wear something more robust than a dress watch. So that's sort of the thing. And then some other things are more like weekend only watches. So anyway, I'll be able to do something where it'll be much more analytical and be able to break that down in a way that hopefully I can make it interesting, or I'll make it not interesting, but I'll still break it down regardless. DeRosa says, yep, nailed it. The 38 millimeter Traditional is the value, which is just how expensive the other models are. And I love the Traditional. I love the Dolphin hands and the classic look. It feels very Calatrava derivative, which is why I haven't pulled the trigger on it. DeRosa says, my latest purchase was the Mark 20. Really enjoying it. Park Watch Chimes says he'd love to get the Breguet. Oh, yes. I made the same. Yes, you read Type 20. See, I get those mixed up too, Mark 20 and Type 20. It's like, are we talking about the Breguet pilot watch, or are we talking about the IWC pilot watch? But it's an easy message. See, of all these things and all these different brands that they both would do double X, it's really on both of them. It's really IWC and Breguet's fault that we were confused. Yes, spreadsheet for wear history. I almost didn't do it. I was making it last year and I was like, this is full nerd. Do I want, and I'm like, but I am. So let's full nerd it. I'm tired of guessing. I want it to be precise. So anyway, that will be it for this live stream. I will be on tomorrow morning, US time, going to do a little bit of discussion about watches and wonders, assuming I hold up for it. We'll see how I feel in the morning. But thank you, everyone who was able to tune in live. I do appreciate it. If you're watching the recording and you have thoughts about brands that you've never owned, but you really like a lot of the models from and wish you would get or are looking to get at some point in the future, I'd love to read about those. And that's going to be it for this stream. So take care, everybody. I will talk to you all later.